Welcome to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan.
Welcome to Surrogates Corner with James Mahan. James passionately advocates for surrogates and egg donors, providing legal support at every stage of the journey. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about what happens after delivery, from final payments to emotional transitions, and how surrogates can navigate the fourth trimester with confidence and care. James, thanks so much for joining me again today.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be with you.
I'm kind of curious, what are a surrogate's legal responsibilities once the baby is delivered, if there are any?
Yeah, so this is the great lawyer answer, which is it depends. And the reason for that is that this processes are not the same state by state. So some states have what we call a pre-birth order, which means that most of the legal aspect of getting parental rights for the intended parents is handled before the baby's born, hence the pre-birth order, right? The judge signs it typically in the end of the second trimester, and we just wait for baby to be born, in which case most of the stuff for the surrogate at that point in time is done. There are a handful of states that are called post-birth order states, which, just like it sounds, means that we don't get the court order until after delivery. In those instances, there's maybe one or two documents the surrogate signed, just kind of affirming that it's not her child, but for whatever reason, that state may want that to be done after the baby's born, just because that's what their legislature decided to do. The biggest thing that will happen for some surrogates is that they are matched with international intended parents. What the international IPs need to go home does vary a lot country by country and sometimes regionally for different intended parents. So for instance, some of the IPs who are from Spain have to get a whole bunch of additional items and declarations of things signed post-delivery. And the surrogate usually has like 2 or 3 of those that she has to do. For some of the Nordic countries, similarly, they have to sign like a declaration affirming that the baby's not theirs. Sometimes they have to give a few additional details like evidence of their marriage certificate, if any, or birth certificate. So those states or those countries' consular offices require additional things that the surrogate might have to provide. The contract will usually say, once your domestic process is done, if the IPs need additional help or support from you to facilitate establishing their parental rights in their home country, that you're willing and able to do it. Now, I think I've had one surrogate be asked to be flown to a home country to do it. That's like a rare unicorn of mine. Most of the times they're signing declarations or doing Zoom calls. Occasionally they maybe go into a local consular office, your San Francisco, LA's, DC's, Texas has got a couple of them if they need them. But again, it's not always the same for every IP in every home country, but that's usually the two main items that a surrogate might have to do post-delivery is sign a domestic document if she's delivering in a post-birth state, or sign some additional documents for the IPs when they go home if they need that for their immigration purposes for traveling back to home country.
And then, James, how and when do the intended parents' names go on the birth certificate? And what's the surrogate's role in that process?
Yeah, again, varies by state. So some states will have it where, especially if there's a pre-birth order, the state will say, and the judgment will say, this baby belongs to these intended parents. The surrogate's name does not go on it. She is not a parent of the child, and the intended parent or parents' names go on it directly at creation. There are a handful of states that will say, we understand that, but the reality is that vital records are going to say this woman delivered a baby. So we're going to make a birth certificate that says she delivered a baby and then immediately kind of amend it and then put the intended parents' names on it. Where it gets a little bit tricky is that there are instances where a surrogate might deliver early. We don't have the judgment back in time, because then the hospitals have to go off of their natural presumption that is this woman who comes into the hospital and delivers a baby is probably the parent of the baby, because for millennia, that's what's happened. However, now we get these court orders that say, yes, but we're doing this different type of deal with the surrogate's journey, so she's not the legal parent of the baby. Absent that, the hospitals don't really have a choice, and most of them have like a 10-day limit that says if we don't have anything from a court saying that this is not your baby, we're going to create a birth certificate that says you are the parent of the child, and then you guys can figure out amending the birth certificate or getting a court order to fix that later. Even in instances where that happened, and we saw it a lot during COVID because courthouses shut down, things got delayed, people didn't get here, and we still had early deliveries. It didn't really change where we would wind up, 2 months after delivery, but it just makes a little bit more of a headache and kind of uncertainty for people when like a baby's born, the parents are super excited, but the birth mother's name's on the birth certificate, and that freaks people out a little bit. But again, we don't see that very often. So it should be that almost always the surrogate's name doesn't go on the birth certificate, or if it does, it's immediately amended and a new one's created with the intended parents' names on it.
And then what's the typical hospital protocol after delivery? How is the handoff or separation handled?
Yeah, so it's again, the hospitals will usually say if we have a pre-birth order that identifies the intended parents as the legal parents of the baby, then once baby's born, we don't really ask the surrogate to do very much. There are some places where the surrogate and intended parents can offer to let the baby stay with the surrogate in her room until everybody discharges, because the surrogates normally are not allowed to leave for at least 24 hours after delivery, sometimes 48 or longer if you have a C-section. There are instances where intended parents are just not available or to get there in time, or the baby's born early and they're in the, in midair trying to fly to the hospital, and we let that happen. Many hospitals ask for what we just call a birth plan that says, hey, we're a surrogacy journey. This is what everybody intends. And we hope it covers, 95% of the kind of contingencies we might see. If we're not there, the surrogate can, the baby can stay with the surrogate, or we would like these, shots or these ointments for the baby. We don't usually give the surrogate any kind of authority over making those choices. We will usually say the parents will decide, but the surrogate will kind of cooperate or facilitate that happening if we need to. But I mean, it can vary. I mean, the ideal and the hope is that the parents are local, baby is born, parents are there, they're at the hospital, they take baby, but that's not always how, I mean, babies come when babies want to come. So that's not always what we get. And the contract tries to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're just doing it in a collaborative and kind of cooperative process to make sure that we have a birth experience for both sides that everyone's kind of hoping for.
And James, can a surrogate stay in contact with the baby or the IPs after the birth? And how should that be handled emotionally and legally?
Yeah, so your contract will say two things usually post delivery. One, we like to see a closure clause that just says, "Hey, once baby's born, and we have now this live baby that's out, and we have parents that are there, we try to give the surrogate, her immediate family, her kiddos, sometimes a chance to meet with the intended parents and the baby. Usually, this is like cool pictures, the roses, flowers, bears, all of which is great. It's just a chance for them to kind of have a nice closure moment to that. For some of my surrogates with young children, this is kind of important for them because, like, mom was pregnant and she left, went to the hospital, and then she wasn't pregnant and there's no baby. Like, what happened? So it just kind of provides that sort of, event for everybody to enjoy that. Once everybody discharged from the hospital, there's really not a contractual obligation for people to stay in touch if they don't want to. We usually just say parents can contact the surrogate as long as she's open to it. Surrogate can contact the intended parents as long as they're open to it. However, there won't be any communication directly with the baby without the parents' permission, right? So, and a lot of times my GCs and their IPs will stay social media friends, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or WeChat or WhatsApp or whatever platform they're using. And they'll kind of, every 6 months to a year, share pictures, just let people know how things are going. We just don't contractually obligate people to do that. I jokingly tell my surrogates, like, you're agreeing to carry their baby for them. You're not becoming their best friend just because you did it. So if you don't want to or they don't want to, that's fine. But we like to encourage it if we can.
Are postpartum follow ups and medical care for the surrogate typically covered under the contract?
Yeah. So usually what we either call our complications period or the provision that talks about how long intended parents are responsible for medical costs for the pregnancy. Usually we'll go all the way up to delivery, and then for some, either minimum or up to a maximum of time afterwards. Generally, 3 months is pretty average for what we see. Sometimes it's 8 weeks. If it's an uncomplicated pregnancy and it's a singleton, usually by 8 weeks, the surrogate has gone through her postpartum check. She's gotten her clear, bill of health from her OB, and she's kind of released to go back to normal life. At which point we say, hey, parents, you're no longer responsible for any ongoing medical costs. If there are complications, if there is a C-section, if there's something going on with delivery that might take a little bit longer before the OB is willing to clear her, usually it will say if there are complications in that first 8 or 12 week period, then they could pick up an additional maybe 8 or 12 weeks. Usually we don't see anything beyond 24 weeks post-delivery. So if you need ongoing medical care more than 6 months after delivery, it usually would just say we're going to go back like we're a pre-contract, and now the surrogate is kind of responsible for those payments on her own. One thing I like to stress to my surrogates, though, is we're not talking about when the bill arrives. So, it's not uncommon in our system to get an insurance adjusted bill 9 months after delivery for something that happened like, the first 9 hours after delivery. The parents are still paying for that, even though it comes in 9 months later, because it's for services that were rendered in those first, 8 to 12 weeks. So that's what we're looking at is when was the care given, not when does the bill show up to the surrogate.
That makes sense. And then what emotional shifts can happen after delivery, even when everything went smoothly? And how can a surrogate prepare for that?
Yeah, so I mean, one, there's just the normal emotional kind of, let down of like just you've had a baby, right? So just kind of coming through that, like any other postpartum, we do see postpartum depression every now and then with our surrogates. There's just kind of a different feel of like I just carried a baby for 9 months and now I'm not around it anymore. So there's just kind of the adjustment that sort of comes with that. Usually staying in touch with the IPs, at least for a little bit, helps kind of smooth that sort of transition out for the surrogate because there's just sort of this ongoing knowledge of like, hey, baby's doing great, and you have some information. What gets hard is when people kind of, high five at the hospital, they discharge, and then you just don't hear anything. You're like, "Oh, I mean, I wonder how hope baby's doing well." And that kind of uncertainty can create a little bit of angst for some of my surrogates. So we like to encourage again those provisions that say we will stay in contact or we can, or the surrogate can reach out to the IPs and just say, "Hey, just want to find out like how baby's doing, how are things going, how are you guys?" Um, and again, usually that is fine and kind of allowed by everybody. But there are instances where that postpartum switch for the surrogate sometimes, and this is a kind of a different one that I didn't really expect, but I have seen a couple times, is that the surrogate and the IPs get very, very close during the pregnancy, and everyone's super excited. They have the baby, and maybe this is the parent's first child, and everything just goes in the background, and they're just totally focused on baby, and they completely forget about the surrogate because they're just focused on this. Maybe not intentionally, but just kind of where their attention goes. And the surrogate kind of feel like, oh, we had this great relationship going, and now a baby's born. I'm kind of, like cast aside. And a lot of times it's not intentional, but it's just like any, couple or mom who has a baby, like your life tends to focus on that initially right away. And you can sort of start to, put other things in the background or do a second level, but behind it. And so just knowing that you have the ability to reach out or kind of say, hey, just wanted to follow up. Usually for the surrogate, it's important not to like, not harass, but not to kind of constantly like, ping the IPs like every, couple hours, like, how's baby? You haven't talked to me, send me a picture. Like that's usually not a great way to go. But just saying, I hope you guys are doing well and enjoying this experience. I would love to hear from you or see pictures if you can, when the time is right and you guys are feeling comfortable with that, right? We want to encourage kind of a long-term relationship if that's what the parties want. And the best way to facilitate that is again, with honey, not vinegar. So that tends to be what we like to see for that situation.
And it sounds like you hold their hand and help walk through that whole process with them. So it makes it easier for that transition. Thank you for doing that. What's the usual timeline for closing out the escrow account and finalizing payments?
Yeah. So escrow typically is going to be held by a third party. Sometimes it's a law firm. Sometimes it's an escrow agency. General terms will say if you have a baby and there's a delivery, at least 6 months, the escrow account will stay open. Sometimes it's up to a year. My preference is 9 to 12 months, just because, especially with our US insurance system, it's not uncommon to see insurance bills come in that 8, 9, 10 month period. It's just easier when the money is already kind of stashed with somebody that can handle that. The contract will say even if the escrow account is closed, if the bill is the responsibility of the intended parents, they are meant to pay it, which they usually do, but sometimes the parents are not domestic, they're international, and they are trying to chase them down in whatever home country after they have a baby for, a $8,000 hospital bill. There are cases where like that payment is slow to come and the surrogate's the patient. So that bill is in her name. And so we like to keep those open at least at minimum 6. If we think there's outstanding bills that have not been paid or we're still waiting for ones to come in, usually we'll say like they can't close it until we're pretty sure that all the bills have been paid, or a longer time period. I mean, again, I only work with the surrogates, so my preference is the 9 or 12 month period, just because that gives them a little bit more peace of mind to know that like some minimum balance of an escrow account is like on hand and available for this when those bills come in.
James, here's where I'd like to wrap this up today. And that is, what advice do you give to surrogates preparing for the fourth trimester, that emotional, physical, and legal transition?
Yeah, so I mean, the legal part is generally pretty easy, right? Like you've gotten to the end of your journey. Most of the legal stuff is either already done or there might be 1 or 2 documents they have to sign. And hopefully, everything has gone, in a way that they were expecting and desiring when they got into the journey to begin with. The emotional side is harder. I mean, I found that just like with every woman in her pregnancy, it can go differently. Their reactions and how they feel about it is different. I feel like knowing that there are resources that are available to them, and I talk to a lot of them, but there are also, licensed mental health professionals who specialize in surrogacy and deal with this all the time. I have some podcasts that I've done with some of the professionals. There are resources available to them that they can reach out and talk to if they feel like that would be helpful and beneficial to them. And most of their benefit packages allow for that up to like 3 to 6 months post-delivery anyway. So my hope and prayer is that their journey goes smoothly. They get to do exactly what they want to do. They have a wonderful post-birth experience with the IPs. We don't always get that. Sometimes there are just things that happen that no one was expecting. And there are professionals that can deal with that. The agencies, that there is one in place, are good resources for that. And some of my surrogates will come to me directly and say, hey, James, this is what happened. Do you have any suggestions? And I can refer them to, people. I mean, I love to be a helping hand and, and a shoulder if I need to, but there are people that specialize in this, that like, if there's a medical need for that on the mental health side, that I'm more than happy to share with people so they can get that help that they need. But then I think also just for the surrogates to realize that when you got into this process because you hopefully wanted to help someone have a child and help build their family, and you've gotten to that point and you've had a baby for them, and now their whole life, or another baby for their family, is all about that miracle and that blessing and gift that you gave them. Like, what an amazing thing that you have done. So even if it's not the experience that you thought it was going to be, just know that you have radically changed someone's life, for the better. Because in my belief, like, being a parent, no matter what, changes everyone for the better. So that experience alone should give you something to kind of rest on, but that there are help and there are resources out there if you need it. Just don't be afraid to reach out and ask.
And we'll leave it there for today. I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, both for the surrogates and for the families who are bringing new life into their family and changing their lives. Today's been tremendous guidance and great insight. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with our audience. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan. To learn more or get support from a firm that puts surrogates first, visit surrogatescorner.com. Be sure to like, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss the next show. We'll see you there.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.